But what happened then? What happened was the children couldn't get into the school, and Hayes Brooks, who was the congressman, called President Eisenhower and arranged for a meeting between Governor Faubus and Eisenhower. And Faubus went up to the White House, and summer White House in Newport, and he met the president, and he came out, and he said, the president dressed me down like a general dresses down a sergeant. And he said to Eisenhower he would allow the integration of the school, and then he went out and told the press the opposite. Well, Eisenhower was not happy. And he was considering sending troops, and he got conflicting advice. Jimmy Burns, who had been a member of the Supreme Court, resigned in World War II in order to run our domestic part of the war effort, was a great friend of Harry Truman, was then governor of South Carolina, was not really, he was a moderate on race, but he saw Eisenhower and he said, if you send troops to Little Rock, you will have to reoccupy the South. Are you prepared for a second Reconstruction? It's the best that will happen is that they will close the school and no one will be educated. But Brownell, Eisenhower's Attorney General, said you have to send those troops. You have to do it. It's a rule of law. The country's at stake here. You've got to support this decision. And Eisenhower, who was an activist but not necessarily spoke that way, he wanted to send the troops, and he did. He did. He got 1,000 of the 101st Airborne Division, and every American who lived at that time knew who the 101st Airborne was. The 101st Airborne were those troops that had parachuted into Normandy, and some had gotten hung up on the steeples where they'd been just shot down by the machine guns. They were the heroes of the Bulge, and Eisenhower deliberately took that division, and he put 1,000 on airplanes, and they flew into Little Rock, and the next day they just took those children into the school, and the pictures were taken, and those pictures went around the world. So I say that was a great day. That was a great day for the rule of law. It was a great day for the cause of equality. It was a great day for the United States of America. I'd like to end the story there, but I can't. I can't. Unfortunately, I can't end it there. Why? Because what happened? What happened? They were in school for a while. They had a pretty tough time, those 9. Pretty tough time. Read the book about what happened to them. And by the end of the year, a new school board's elected, segregationists. They say we're closing the schools, and all the schools are closed, and they try to get it legally. Sorry, they try. No, they're not going to. I got that wrong. They say we don't want to go ahead with this, bringing our case, and they bring the case because we've got to get to the case I like. They get up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court in Cooper versus Aaron, that's the case, says to the segregationist school board, I don't care if you're a segregationist board or an integrationist board, you go ahead and integrate the school. And all 9 judges, all 9 signed it. And that's unusual. All right? Hey, 9 judges. Think of the Cherokees. 9. We could have had 990, 900, 9,000. What happened? I've ruined my punchline. But most of you know it anyway. The day after that decision came out, Governor Faubus closed the school. That's what happened. And nobody was educated for the next year at Central High. And it was very, very tough. Tougher on many than the previous year had been. You say? Does not have a happy ending. Or does it have a happy ending? I mean, things began to move. Just about that time, we began to see the freedom rides. We began to see the bus boycotts. We began to see lots of other things beginning to go on in the South. And in my mind, I'm a judge. I'm biased. I think that moment was a great moment when they sent those 1,000 troops on the airplane. So to me, I like that case, even though it showed the difficulty. It was a turning point, and things began to change. And so for me, when I had to talk to a paratroop general from Russia. Was sent by the court to the court by the State Department. See, he'd been in charge of pointing the missiles at the United States, and they changed the direction. So the State Department said, we should be nice to this man. So he came to the court, and he was asking me about my favorite cases, and I said, that's certainly one, Cooper versus Aaron. Cooper versus Aaron. And it shows that the paratroopers and the judges must be friends. You see, I want you to see it's complicated. It's complicated. But it was a great moment for the law, and a great moment for that cause in America, those 1,000 troops. And now when we roll the reel forward, you see, take your least favorite case of the last few years. For some people it might be abortion. For others it might be prayer in schools. For others it might be Bush versus Gore. I mean, I dissented in Bush versus Gore. I thought it was wrong. But I heard, certainly probably half of America thought it was wrong, maybe 500,000 more than half. I don't know. But the point is this. Even though it was unpopular. And who made this point? I heard Harry Reid make this point. And I don't think he thought this was a great decision. But he made a point that's an important point. He said, despite the fact that it was very unpopular, very important, and may well have been wrong, and I think he thought it was wrong, and I certainly did, people did follow it. There were no guns. There were no killing each other in the street. They followed it. And I know when I speak to you or others, a certain percentage of people, I'll say there were no riots and nobody was killed and so forth. You'll say, and too bad there weren't a few riots. Yeah, I know some people are thinking that. And when they think that, I say, oh, really? Turn on the television set. You say, turn it on and see what happens in countries that decide their major differences that way. Instead of, well, it's not a perfect system, but we do have this law, and we do try to follow it, and people are pretty willing to carry out the decision and not kill each other over it, even when it's unpopular and even when it may well be wrong. You see what I want this woman from Ghana, the president of the court there, to know, and what I want others to know? I say, my goodness, that's a treasure. That's a treasure that's developed gradually and slowly, lots of ups and downs in this country. It's developed gradually and slowly over the course of 200 years that include a civil war, that include slavery, that include 80 years of legal racial segregation, that include all kinds of things. But gradually, we've come around to a world where the 300 million will accept it as a way of deciding their differences, and that is a treasure. And if people don't know about it, it'll disappear. It'll disappear in a generation, 2 generations, or 3. So really, it's just a very long, extended commercial, this first part, for teaching civics in the high schools. And for, right, that's right, because I can't teach it, but I can say to the parents and to the teachers that I certainly hope it's taught. And I may have some responsibility there, but we all have that responsibility. The responsibility to understand those stories and to understand what it is this institution does. But I'm not going to let the court off entirely. I'm not going to say this is totally a matter for the legislature. It's totally a matter for the students, totally a matter for the teachers, totally a matter for the parents. It is pretty much. But still, I say the court may not be able to do too much about this attitude, but still they can decide cases. And I think the deciding of the cases has at least a little bit to do with this too. Well, what do you mean? Well, it can at least show people how, I think, we can go about deciding cases and very often do. And I think it's important we know that too. So I do take a position here in half the book, and I put the second question this way. I know what you're thinking. I don't say it quite in this wise guy way. But I say, I bet I know what you're thinking. How do we decide these really difficult cases here? You think, here's how we decide it. Now, hold your finger to the political wind. We're junior league politicians. That's what it is. Junior league politicians. And that's how these tough cases are decided. Very open-ended, good arguments both sides, but that's basically what it is. I say, no, it isn't. They say, well, naturally, you would say that. And I say, no, honestly. I mean, first of all, if we were deciding on political grounds, if it were really politics, I mean, why would Hamilton have given us the job? I mean, give it to some real politicians. Give it to Congress. And he certainly thought of that. And anyway, we're terrible politicians. Judges all think they're great politicians, but they're awful. And if you want some proof of that, go back and read Dred Scott, which I put in here for a couple of reasons. And one of the reasons is the only thing I can think of in respect to Dred Scott, which you mostly all know, I'm sure, of how the Supreme Court said the descendant of a slave is not a person under the Constitution, not a citizen, and can't bring a case in court. And also, by the way, which you may not know, said that the Missouri Compromise was unconstitutional. And also, by the way, which you may not know either, said that you couldn't take a slave away from a slave owner in a free state because that was to deprive the slave owner of property without due process of law. And they did much more in this decision terrible than most people understand. They just think it's bad. But it's worse. But so why, in fact, did they do this? And the best answer I've come up with or said or read, I think, is, well, they thought somehow that they were going to stop the Civil War. Well, if they thought that, they started the Civil War. Now, that's not quite true, but it's close. I mean, Benjamin Curtis wrote a fabulous dissent, I thought, where he really showed that under the law of the day, even without the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, under the law of the day, this decision was wrong, really wrong, from beginning to end. And one person who read that dissent was Abraham Lincoln, who called it a legal astonisher, and he used it as the background for his speech at Cooper Union, and that shot him forward in the Republican Party and really committed them to something like abolition. They wouldn't have admitted that then, but he was then elected and events took off. But anyway, if Roger Taney thought he was going to stop the Civil War with that opinion, he sure was wrong. And I can just use that as an example. I mean, it may be the worst one I could find, but nonetheless, don't believe that judges know politics. So, one, they shouldn't. Two, they're terrible at it. And stay away from politics. All right, if it isn't politics, what is it? Well, we could try history. I mean, some people in very good faith believe the thing to do is to try to look to what would the framers think. I say history, let's look and see what the framers think. I think, I mean, you know, I have a number of flip arguments against it, but my flip arguments usually have something solid to them. George Washington didn't think about the internet. Neither did Madison know how the First Amendment would apply to television. Neither, and of course, many of our cases are like that. There aren't many that we can decide by just asking what the framers would have thought about the particular application of this phrase in the Constitution to this particular set of circumstances. And we have 9 historians, if you want to do everything with history. And anyway, you know, so there's a number of stock arguments against that, all of which I believe. But the response that Justice Scalia makes, which is not such a bad response, because his motive here, and those who want to hold this point of view have a very good motive. They're trying to keep the subjective impulses of the judge under control, and they think this is a way to do it. And what Justice Scalia, because we talk, and we talk publicly sometimes, and together on this question. And he'll say, let me tell you a story. There were the 2 campers, and one of them sees the other putting on some running shoes. What are you doing? He says, why are you putting on running shoes? He says, there's a bear. He says, you can't outrun a bear. He says, yes, but I can outrun you. No, he's not going to say he has the perfect system. He's just going to say it's better than mine and better than others. All right, so this is a challenge here. So I want to say that doesn't work too well. Well, what does?